for the live stream to go on. Hi, Justine. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Hi, Chris. If you can go on to mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
Richard, have you started the recording?
Yes, we have, Chair, and it's live, so.
Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this, the July meeting of the Worcestershire Acute Hospitals NHS Trust Board. Delighted to see many of you watching our board meetings, which are available on YouTube. And nice to see members of the public and friends from Health Watch at the meeting with us today. We've had a busy board workshop already, covering a patient story, talking about boarding and some of the challenges we have there. We had a session on how we're developing our patient experience reporting. We had a session with our friends from Health Watch. And we also had a session on our work, which is developing on our values and the way we approach our behaviours towards one another. For members of the public who use our services, hopefully you're starting to see some real signs of progress in our operational performance. We'll touch on some of those today. But I am conscious that despite the enormous endeavours, day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year of our frontline teams, we do not and are still not getting everything right. And the experience for some of you isn't the way we would want it to be. But I can assure you that as a board, we're doing everything in our power to improve things as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I don't think we've got any apologies today, have we, Erica?
Michelle Lynch, please, Chair.
You're quite right, Erica. Apologies. Any new declarations of interest from colleagues? Please raise a digital hand. Vicky.
Thank you. So, Chair, just to let you know that I've resigned from my exec post to take up a new post in the independent sector, and I have put that on the register of interest as well. Thank you.
Vicky, we're very sad to see you go, but we wish you well for the future. Thank you. And Sue?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Russell. Yes, my daughter is about to leave the NHS and join a local Worcester-based healthcare consultancy group called Vertigan. I did let I think I can't remember, it was Erica at the last meeting I was at, but I'm not sure I've had the form to fill in, the declaration of interest form.
Okay, well, we wish your daughter all the best in a new role. Anything else, colleagues? And Michelle is actually in the meeting with us now, so thank you, Michelle. The minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of June. Was everyone happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Could you please raise a digital hand for me if you want any corrections made? Okay, can't see any hands raised. Thank you, Simon, for chairing that meeting for me. And I don't think I've got any matters arising on that. Can colleagues tell me if there are any matters arising which weren't in the pack, which I should be aware of? Please raise a digital hand. Okay, otherwise we'll pick everything up as we go along. So, items for review and assurance, and we start off, and it's clearly a very busy time, Glenn. New government, new challenges. Glenn, your Chief Executive's report, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, probably a sad reflection of me is that at any moment in time, I have a favourite chart. And what I've included in my board pack this time is my current favourite chart. So those of you who are watching online, I hope you've got access to the board pack. So the chart at the foot of that first page of the report shows the average age of patients in our beds. And this is an average snapshot over the first quarter of this year. And I do this chart from time to time in all of the trusts across the group because it's a great illustration of the age profile of our patients. So the dark blue on that chart are emergency admissions, and by year of age along the bottom part, you can see it peaks at about 102, I think it is. And obviously shows emergency admissions in the blue. It shows elective admissions in the amber, and our maternity admissions in the light blue. And it shows you that for your average district general hospital, around 3/4 of the beds are occupied by older patients who've come in as an emergency. Now, that shouldn't be a great surprise to us, but it just shows you the full impact of that. And what it also helps to emphasise is the need to have adequate frailty services. It also shows actually the relatively small footprint of elective activity in any sites like ours also. So just an increase of 2 or 3% in your urgent care occupancy could wipe out half of your elective bed stock, and it kind of reinforces the need to protect your elective beds. So how do we tackle that cohort of patients? Well, I'm really pleased to say that we've made some significant progress on developing and expanding our frailty service. This was one of the items in the 10-point plan that we agreed last year. And it's a difficult area to recruit to, particularly to be able to appoint consultants. So we've been innovative in the way that we've structured that workforce, and it's great that we now have 3, soon 4 frailty nurse consultants in our team, and also other disciplines of advanced clinical practice. So through that team, as you can see on the chart on the next page, the effective management of pulling those patients out of A&E and into our frailty assessment unit drives down length of stay. It means that those patients get effective treatment, get home quickly, which is the fundamental aim for frail older patients, because as we've often discussed here, the impact on patients of staying any longer in hospital than they need to is really quite debilitating, and for particularly frail older patients can mean that they in some cases will never get home again. So really important to have that frailty service. I'm really pleased to see that through that SDEC we've been able to reduce length of stay by about 4 days, and there's more to come. I mean, this is the frailty unit at Worcester Royal is what I'm referring to here, but we need to now develop a frailty unit on the Alex site in Redditch, which is our next priority. My report then talks about the financial regime. I won't go into that. I then talk about urgent emergency care linked to the absence of a tariff in emergency care, which I think is one of the reasons why it's been harder for the NHS to tackle those demand issues. sites like ours can end up being overwhelmed with urgent care without any funding to be able to deal with the solutions. So I'm pleased that national thinking is starting to move back towards at least an annual reset of the activity and the contracts associated with urgent care. And if we had additional funding, we would probably choose to invest in solutions outside of hospital, actually, but we do need to have the ability to invest in order to tackle those increases in demand. And we're looking at that one at the moment, actually, in terms of next year's contractual arrangements with our integrated care system. There's then an update on the pathology network. We are expected to be in a pathology network that spans Coventry, Warwickshire, Hereford and Worcester. And we are now going into an accelerated period where we're producing a business case, which hopefully we'll be able to go back to our full boards meeting in August. Dermatology update there, which is good to see, and Stephen and I met with our dermatology team and the Wye Valley team to see how they're bringing those two services together, and the progress they're making on that is really quite encouraging. What's probably even more encouraging is car parking. So again, a 10-point plan issue and a real concern for our staff, particularly at Worcester Royal. Moving forward with park and ride and moving forward with planning for a multi-storey car park is a really great thing to be able to talk about. We hope to pull that one off very, very soon. I then talk about the multi-agency discharge event, and what that has helped us to do is to look at improving flow across both of our acute sites. And there's some useful indicators in there, and I think it's one of the best made events that we've had locally for a number of years now. But what it's helped to also emphasise is that there are a group of patients who still do get stuck in our acute beds because the discharge pathways are not working as effectively as they could. So we're working really closely with the Health and Care Trust in order to look at those pathways. And also this morning, actually, in our workshop, it was good to hear that Health Watch Worcestershire are focused on discharge as being one of the biggest concerns of our patients. So that's something that we will be seeking to improve over the coming year. More from our great teams then talks about the new intranet, and I'm happy to take any questions on anything else.
No, that's great, Glenn. A really, really powerful chart, that age demographic of the usage of the total beds. Thank you for that. Questions and perspectives to Glenn? It really does go to show, that chart, Glenn, that if we can speed up discharges, reduce length of stay, we can increase the capacity for elective activity, which is not only helpful for the many thousands of people which we know on our waiting lists, but also helps us financially by generating income, because, as you say, we are paid on a payment by results basis for elective work, whereas for an A&E work, we're given a set sum of money. And even though volume, as I'm sure Stephen will touch on in a second, volume into our A&E is increasing significantly, the amount of money we're getting isn't. And just on the subject of our A&E, as you didn't mention it, we were delighted that Her Royal Highness Princess Anne joined us on Friday to open up the new, not so new now, ED department. And I'd particularly like to thank Wendy, Dave and Claire, who escorted Her Royal Highness around, and Richard Haynes for all of the organisation work behind the scenes that went on there. Okay, so if there are no further questions to Glenn, we'll move on to the integrated performance report. And Stephen, over to you.
Thanks. And yeah, the good thing going after that chief exec report is I've probably wiped out half of my introduction, because it was kind of had the three themes really, but to pick up on them, flow as ever is a key thing that we've touched on, and in particular just want to draw attention to the one is the number of attendances that we've still been seeing through our departments, and actually last month we had the record number that the trust has experienced. we're working closely with system partners, and we the other week undertook an audit with them around particularly those patients that are walking into ED rather than being brought by ambulance, to see if there's any particular trends or anything that we can look at and learn from as a system to try and improve that experience. The second is discharge, and we've touched on that. The third that you'll pull out of the quality section that has been impacting flow is around our IPC, and Sarah and her teams have been working really, really hard, and we did have a spike of COVID admissions through that we had to reintroduce masks for, but I think with that we've now seen a decline in that, so it feels like on COVID we've had a peak and it's reducing, but there are other pressures around that. And the other thing that we've been working really hard on was trying to reduce that excess capacity, which is usually in areas that we don't particularly want to be in. So we had additional beds on our pathway discharge unit and other areas, and we've kind of been holding the line on reducing those so that we can improve quality further down the line, in particular the work we're doing around Aconbury Zero. So we've had high attendances with that reduced capacity through either IPC or the work that we're doing. And that you see some of the pressure in there, but we are still maintaining some improvements in some area, but we've still got to go harder and faster. And the other bit then to link to flow is that productivity and reducing the waiting list. So our first and foremost focus is around reducing the list from a quality and an experience point of view. We don't want patients waiting too long for their treatment. But what's pleasing is there are some, again, green shoots in the report of us holding our agency cost and it starting to reduce, plus doing more elective and getting more of that income into the trust, which makes a contribution. So not only do we do the right thing by patients, but organisationally we start to get ourselves on a better footing financially. That's not to say that in the coming months the productivity and the driving at that elective work will be a challenge, and we manage that really closely through our Finance Recovery Board. So they're the main strands that I just wanted to pull out, and I'd hand over to colleagues to do their more in-depth sections. So I think we'll start with Helen.
Thank you, Stephen. Helen, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that great introduction, Stephen. So I just want to touch on the front door at the moment. And so for my first part of the update, and Stephen has says we are starting to see green shoots, and from a flow point of view, we are starting to see significant reductions in the numbers of ambulance handovers. And also the numbers of patients that are spending more than 12 hours in the ED. I mean, it's clearly not where we want it to be, but we're starting to see that now consistently reduce in numbers. The one thing that is challenging us at the moment is the EAS standard. And many of the things that impact on that standard in particular, so how quickly we can get patients through our ED within 4 hours, is often due to the fact that we're waiting to put patients into beds on the wards. So just wanted to just highlight a couple of things that we've got in terms of some of the challenges that we've got around discharges, and some of those patients that stay with us a really, really long time. So we've got 3 groups of patients that tend to have a protracted length of stay. So those are the patients that are waiting for immediate rehabilitation and assessment, which is pathway 3 from in the system. We've got patients who are waiting for housing. We've got patients who are waiting for out of area. And if you add the amount of days that these patients have been waiting actually on a waiting list to go, that's 1,223 days from 48 patients. Now, if you think about the impact that then has, how many times can we turn over those beds and actually start to move those patients that are waiting over 12 hours in our ED to the right place to get the right care? But also we had a conversation this morning about boarding on the wards, and how it's not really where we want to be as an organisation, and we should really start to drive that down as quickly as possible. But actually, if we can make a movement on this group of patients, what that then does is address both of those issues at the same time. So we really need that real focus on how we support timely discharge out of the hospital and into patients' next day. So that should be a real focus of us now for me and the team, and how we work with our system partners to move that along. On the next thing I just wanted to touch on was our continued improvements in our cancer standards against increasing cancer referrals. So we have seen month on month slight increase in those cancer referrals, but we're still managing to maintain our cancer performance around 28 days, which is the faster diagnosis standard, and 62-day treatments for cancer. From an outpatient point of view, I'm really pleased to see that we're holding our position on our DNA rate, and also our position on patient-initiated follow-ups. So what that then does is create capacity within the outpatient programme for patients to be seen in a timely way, because patients aren't not turning up, so we're using those lists effectively. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on, which is probably not so positive, is that our diagnostic performance in terms of patients getting their diagnostic within 6 weeks is really not where we would want that to be. And that has the performance has fallen over the last few months relating to that. But that's because we've had a significant focus on cancer. And so now we're starting to recover the position on cancer. We can reset the 6-week diagnosis standard moving forward. So I won't go into any more. They're just the pieces that I wanted to highlight. So I'll just take any questions, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you for your hard work. And please thank your team on our behalf. Questions and perspectives to Helen. Glenn?
Helen, it kind of links your data with the chart that I discussed a few minutes ago here. Those very long stay patients who are more likely to be frail older patients, obviously we're harming them by keeping them in hospital for too long. The MADE event helped to move some of those patients into other settings. Could you just tell us whether that was because we put extra capacity on during that period, or was it just because of the focus of people to try and expedite their discharge?
Yes, thanks, Glenn. I think the clue's sort of in the title in terms of multi-agency discharge event, and that's really around that significant extra focus that was put in across all partners, including social care, to support patients going home. So it wasn't additional capacity, it was around people making decisions on the spot around whether patients can be discharged or not, rather than there's a little bit of I call it a bit of the wheel of doom. So once you get in, if you're not careful, when patients get into a cycle of shall they go, shall they not go, where do they go, etc., they tend to stay an awful lot longer. And so it's really about trying to strip that piece out to say once a decision is made, then the patient needs to go as quickly as possible to whatever their next destination or the next step is.
And just before we go off that, so I will come to you, Simon. Just to remind me, Helen, you may not know, Neil, you may. Do we get any income? So that for those 48 patients, they were staying something like 30 days extra, 35 days longer than they needed to on average. Do we get any income for those patients after the initial coding, or do we just incur the cost and no income? Neil?
No, those are likely to be non-elective patients, Russell, so they are included within the fixed price contract, so there's no additional income associated with those. No. So they're certainly the cost prices. So
just to put that into some context, if my maths is right, those 48 patients will cost us on an annualised basis something like £500,000 of cost. It's a big cost number, just those 48, so as it rolls forward. But there's an enormous financial opportunity on the waiting list if we're able to get them into the right setting, which is why our systems colleagues, it's an example of where by working differently together, the whole system can win. Simon?
Thanks, Russell, and thanks, Helen. Do we understand what drove that 10.5% increase in walk-ins in May? And is that reflected, or is it still going on in June? Do we know, in July?
So, yeah, thanks, Simon. The increase in numbers that we've seen has been consistent in terms of those levels. So we're not going back to pre-May numbers, so we're starting to see those. We did a walk-in audit, so looked at the patients that had walked in through the front door rather than come by ambulance, because the ambulance activity is pretty steady. A lot of the attendances are patients that actually walk in to the organisation, and that's a bit of a mixed profile, really, Simon. There have been some changes in relation to the minor injuries provision, particularly over weekends. And so that has shifted some of that activity to the EDs across both Redditch and the Worcester sites. And what we think we have started to see is patients actually walking in rather than using an ambulance. And there's been a little bit of a flip in terms of patients that are coming by ambulance. We start to look at the numbers of those patients that are actually discharged when they come in by ambulance, and that's quite a high proportion, and I'll try and include those in the report moving forward for next month or next time. But we've seen a slightly higher acuity in those patients that actually walk into the organisation. But apart from that shift in acuity, I can't say, other than the minor injuries unit provision not being what it has been during the winter, and whether that's made that much of an impact. But we will do more of a deep dive into that to understand.
Thanks, Helen. Okay, team, we'll move on then with your forbearance onto the quality and safety section. Sarah, you can lead on this, and then Jules, if you want to add anything. Sarah?
Russell. So the infection control targets for 24-25 have not yet been published. However, a cause for concern for us in May was an increase in Klebsiella, which increased compared to April and has shown a special cause variation of concern. Klebsiella is a person-to-person contact spread, and we are doing work around hand hygiene and compliance across our ward areas at the moment. Reassuringly, MRSA, C. diff, MSSA and Pseudomonas infections did see a decrease. Compliance target remains a challenge in the trust. We did increase our compliance up to 62%, but as we know, that is quite a far stretch from meeting that target. The key area of concern remains in surgery, with them having over 90% of those overdue complaints in that division. There has been mandated support that has gone into division from this week. So I do expect to plan in the next 2 weeks as to how those complaints will be brought back into line. Total number of falls remains below the national benchmark, and we've had no falls with serious harm throughout May. But what we are seeing is an increase in hospital-acquired pressure ulcers throughout May and into June, although there's been no pressure ulcers which have caused harm across those months. So there's now a focus and increased oversight and scrutiny of all cases by the Deputy Chief Nurses. I'll hand over to Jules for anything you want to add, Jules.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Only thing to highlight, Chair, is just the ongoing concerns that we've got with sepsis screening, just highlighted in the report for board. We're still continuing to work on that. We'll remember we've switched from paper to electronic capture of sepsis screening, and that is proving to be problematic, which the teams are cited and working on currently, but just to highlight that for people's awareness.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to Sarah or Jules? Tony?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Jules, it's my bugbear, which is the sepsis reporting tool. I see there's a reference in there to, depending on what sequence of answers you give to the questions, it then doesn't actually then report on. Is that part of the solution we're trying to seek so that we get the accuracy in our data collection? Thank you.
Yes, Tony, if you're happy for me to respond, Chair, yes, Tony, exactly that. So I think we've got a double pronged kind of issue. One is the function of the electronic capture, I think, and it's just working through how we get the best out of that. And the second element is making sure we've got compliance at ward level with the electronic capture. So it's both that we're working on at the moment.
And thank you, Tony. And Karen?
Thanks, Chair. My question's for Sarah. I'm sure she's expecting it. So I just want to ask again about the complaints. You know, I understand the work that's going in and the interventions that have been put in, particularly into surgery. However, I remain concerned that we're not in any way seeing that dial shift. And in fact, as you highlighted yourself, in some instances, it's going down. And I'm slightly nervous that the same interventions are going to result in the same outcome. And I heard you say about support going in, but I guess I'm just seeking a little bit more assurance that we will get some different outcomes. And how long are we going to wait for this to turn itself around? I just worry that, for me, this is one of those areas that's like recruitment. It's a shop window for us as an organisation.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And I was expecting the question. And we, as an executive team, we do share the concern collectively. And the executive team have now done an intervention into surgery. So we've put in very different support as to what has gone in previously. And we've actually utilised very experienced governance experts from other divisions that manage this very well to go in and support surgery for a period of 6 months. There are also some changes in personnel as well, which will be coming online. So I am hopeful that we will see improvement, certainly on the complaint reduction in the next few months.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Sarah. Look forward to that. And Simon?
A question for Jules, please. Jules, you note the summary health level mortality indicators spike in fluid and electrolyte conditions. Is that just us? Is it something that's going on more widely, or is it just something that seems to be, we need to understand here for us at the moment?
No, that's one of the areas where we have identified we have an outlier kind of against national levels, hence we're doing work around it. So myself and Sarah have been doing a lot of focused work on nutrition and hydration, on electrolyte and fluid prescribing and recording. So that's kind of in progress at the moment and just highlighted for board's awareness. And Chair, if I may, just to support Sarah in response to Karen's question, very much working on some of those governance issues within some of our areas as a collective, and doing things on both the medical and nursing lines, which I think is probably a different approach, and we're hoping will give a different result.
Okay, super. Can I just go back to IPC? And I don't want to give board members or members of the public the idea that I hang around the toilets at the Worcestershire Acute site. But the evidence for closing the lid before flushing the toilet is very strong in terms of C. diff and neurovirus. I noticed that an awful lot, and I've obviously ever been into the men's toilets, don't have a toilet lid. Can we just take away with Scott? Sarah, by your perplexion, you won't have obviously probably been into the men's toilets at Worcestershire. Can I just ask you to, as long as it's not too painful, get someone to audit how many of our toilets on the site have got toilet lids. I've seen a really great campaign elsewhere in an acute, which is don't rush to flush. Please close the lid first. It might seem like a jokey matter, but it actually is. And generally in terms of hygiene at home, let alone in an acute, is an important thing to sort of have a campaign on. I've mentioned it to Fiona Burton, so I'm mentioning it to you. Julie?
I'm really sorry to prolong this discussion, but one of the studies that has stuck with me throughout my life when I had to be infection prevention lead a long, long time ago was a study done where they put cameras in the washroom of a male toilet area, just the sinks, and they looked at how many men washed their hands after the toilet, and it was about 10%. This was a conference of medical microbiologists who should have had every bit of knowledge under the sun. The only way that's been proved to get people to put the lids down is where you've got those ones that automatically do it, like you see in motorway services now, and they use a smaller amount of water, which we might want to talk about later with our green things. But the only way is you've got to close the toilet lid. And there's some things, I was going to bring it up under sepsis, but I didn't, about you can't do step B till you've done step A, and that's the way the best designed systems are. And it might be like the toilet door won't unlock unless the lid's down. So, you know, that there are technological solutions, but education has been proven to be woefully inadequate in this. And I'll also go back to the seatbelt analogy. Everybody knew and nobody put them on till it was the law. Make it the law.
Yeah. Julie, I'm glad you share my passion for toilet lids. And at that point, we'll move on. And to Ali, thank you, Ali, on workforce.
Thank you. So key points to highlight from a workforce perspective. The last board meeting, we'd highlighted that the beginning of the financial year brought about an increase to our establishment through the implementation of some business case expectations. We have since then been successfully recruiting, and we've seen our vacancy factor come down from that previously elevated position. This is hugely complemented by a stable turnover figure as well. We consistently are meeting our staff turnover target. We compare very favourably to model hospital data as well of our peer organisations. So ultimately resulting in a more stable workforce to serve our patients. We have seen as well from a good news perspective, a slight reduction in sickness absence, but I think it's really worth me highlighting this is still a major area of focus and concern for us, particularly around sickness absence for stress and anxiety related illness as well. And we are still not where we need to be from a target perspective there. We know that a number of trusts are struggling with sickness and absence related to stress and anxiety, but in particular our figures do cause concern there. So that is still a key area of focus, and we're working with our divisional colleagues to try and support colleagues as best we can. We know not all of that sickness absence is strictly work related, and much of that also reflects a number of pressures that colleagues are experiencing in their personal lives too, but it's something we're very alive to. From an agency staffing perspective, whilst we have got some stability around our vacancies and our turnover, agency remains an area of focus. We know that some of that sickness absence results in increased agency use and absorption of other pressures as well, whether it's escalated bed pressures or increased volume, can often bring about that need for additional support as well from agency colleagues. We do have some very clear targets set by NHS England around agency use, and particular around reducing off framework use as well. The figures in the board pack that you have today related to May and still show areas of concern. We have been working for a few months now very closely with our divisional colleagues around some localised action plans where we are looking at flipping agency work to other solutions and reducing that off framework, and also looking at areas where we can mix the skill mix differently. And we are starting to see some green shoots of improvement around that in the June data, although that won't be reflected in your pack. So we are starting to see some movement in the right direction. So I guess the key message there is to bear with us and watch this space there for further improvement, and some cautious optimism about the direction of travel that we're seeing there. It's worth me highlighting some small improvements around appraisal, but still some areas of focus. And I think it's fair to say there are still concerns around job planning compliance. It is an area we're still working with divisions on closely to make sure that we are reflecting accurate data. There is some concern. We have a good level of medical appraisal compliance, but a poor level of job planning compliance, and the two figures don't or shouldn't sit side by side. So that tells us that we have got some issues with recording of job plans accurately, We know that we have a number of job plans that we're currently running through our job plan consistency check process as well that may not be recording positively at the moment. So there's still some work to do there to make sure that we're seeing a true picture of job planning. But needless to say, we know there is still a gap to address to improve that compliance as well. And the point I would probably finish on is more of a positive, really, to just reflect the positive situation around statutory mandatory training. This is a critical indicator for us in terms of people being safe and practicing safely in our organisations, and we consistently have got some good performance around statutory mandatory training and essential to role training for colleagues as well. So I'd really extend my thanks to colleagues for prioritising that, because it is a really important thing to make sure we get right. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Ali. Any questions or perspectives to Ali? Karen just congratulating you on that last point. So, Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Ali, I just wanted to progress a little further the discussion on job planning. Obviously, this is a big issue for us, and it's something the Audit and Assurance Committee has got a watchful eye on. But clearly, this is something we want to get right. And I wondered if you could give an indication of the time frame, because it's been an issue for us on board papers for quite some time now.
Yes, I can't accurately give you. Oh, sorry, Chair.
Just going to say, do you want Jules to answer that for you? She's put her hand up. Jules.
Very happy for Jules to answer that.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Ali. I thought that's probably more with me than you, to be fair. So, Colin, answer to your question, and it might just help explain the data a little bit. We are going through quite a difficult, complicated process of identifying what our job plans actually should look like, because one of the issues we've identified is that there is no consistency and equity of kind of rules, if you like, applied to our job plans across the trust. So in order for people to job plan fairly and equitably, we need to be issuing a set of rules and then permitting the divisions or enabling the divisions to get on and do that on our behalf. So in fairness to my divisional colleagues, I wouldn't want this current job planning rate to reflect on them, because at the moment we haven't given them the tools to do the job plans in the way we want them to. So once we've done that, then we'll be expecting our divisional colleagues to get on and help us deliver that new job planning process. And once we get that rolling, I would expect to start seeing some improvement in that, both the job planning rate, but also then we'll be confident that the job plans are being done in a fair and consistent manner, which then should help link into our activity and performance and all of the other bits and pieces that Helen's kind of working on and that Neil is also cited on as well. So it should all link up. In terms of timescale, in order to get a full compliance round done, it's going to take 12 months, because there will be some that have just been job planned, recognising the figure is a rolling figure, that people get job planned at different points currently in the year. So it's a rolling figure. So it will take 12 months then, kind of theoretically, to come up to a reasonable number, but I would expect to start seeing improvements over the next few months. I'm hoping that we will get some rules in, get the training done that we need to, and get kind of colleagues on board with that over the next month or two, and then start to see the figures turn after that.
Thank you, Jules. Very comprehensive answer. I'm sure both Colin and I and colleagues will look forward to the progress. Can I move us along, guys, as we're running a few minutes late? Thank you, Ali, for that. Neil, the finance report, how are you seeing things?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm, as Glenn outlined in his Chief Executive's report, there has been some changes to the plan for 24-25, aligned to the revised financial framework that was put out. So previously, our plan was a deficit of 60.3 million. That's now moved to 57.3 million. 1.8 million of that relates to some additional funding to recompense us for a projected pressure this year around a change in accounting treatment of private finance initiative, as well as a further stretch around our cost and productivity improvement plan. So our CPIP this year now stands at a target of 45.1 million, which is over 6% of our operating expenditure. So significant challenge for us there around cost reduction and improved productivity for the year. Month two, it is early in the year, of course, but at month two, we've got some positive progress in that respect. So we're showing a favourable variance just around the 0.1 million mark. So we've seen some additional expenses around employee costs, retrospective approvals around bank again, but we are working with NHS professionals. They are in and around the trust trying to resolve some of those challenges. Operating expenditure is under at this stage in the year. Some of the big variances that you see on the income and expenditure relate to pass-through drugs and devices, so similar theme. So these are costs that are funded by NHS England and commissioners. So they've been paid for. There is a challenge this year in respect of Hereford and Worcestershire ICB around the drugs, the pass-through drugs. So that is capped this year. So we need to keep an eye on that. At this stage in the year, there's no pressure on that, but we are working with the division around that profile and just making sure that we've got the controls in place as we progress through the year in that respect. The revised financial framework, as Glenn referenced in his Chief Exec's report, does impact on us from a capital perspective. So we are seeing a further reduction to what is already an oversubscribed capital funding pot. So we're now down to £12.5 million of sources of funding for capital, and we know we've got huge backlog maintenance, equipment replacement, as well as supporting developments around improving patient care and performance. So it's a massive challenge there around capital, but we're on track at this point in the year, and we'll need to keep an eye on that as we progress through the year. The revised framework, again, I think this is just going through Treasury in terms of signing it off, does mean that the cash will sit, aligned to our plan, will sit with the ICB. And therefore we'll be able to draw on that as and when our cash profile requires. But clearly, if we are behind plan or we have some particular challenges in terms of cash flow, and we are seeing that early in the year, that will impact on our ability to pay our creditors, our suppliers within 30 days. So we are seeing a challenge in that respect, and we are working with our ICB around drawing down as much as we can to give us that float to ensure that we're paying people on time. Just a couple of other points if I can, Chair, just in terms of, so clearly, as I've mentioned, productivity is going to be a key area of focus for us this year. So at month two, our cost per weighted activity unit, so this is a measure of our productivity. It's 2% lower than April, so it's an improvement. And that's as a consequence of additional cost-weighted activity. So whilst our expenditure has gone up, our activity has gone up as well. So again, it's an improving position, but that's a metric we do need to keep a real focus on this year. Just in respect to CPIP, in the report you can see there we are slightly off track, but they're being offset currently by non-recurrent sources of underspends around business cases and the like. We really do need to really focus on this, and we've got some finance and performance executive meetings with the divisions tomorrow to understand what their productivity and efficiency splits are in that respect, and how close they are to putting that against the target. I'll leave it there for now, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
No, thank you, Neil. Looking forward to those finance and performance meetings tomorrow. Any questions or perspectives to Neil? Okay, it's good to be so close to our financial plan, Neil. So we'll move on then to the perinatal report. And Justine, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this, I'm going to take the paper as read. I've just got a few highlights for this month. Our rolling perinatal mortality rate is below the national rate currently, although you'll see, sadly, within the report, we reported 2 stillbirths and 1 neonatal death in months. You have heard me talk before about a theme around our stillbirth, in that women often attend late with reduced fetal movements. And just draw your attention to why I've got a different background today. This is our RFM campaign. It's a co-produced programme that we've pulled together with our system partners and our users. and you'll hopefully see it along buses, bus stops and various other places across the two counties over the next month to raise awareness of the importance of contacting us early with reduced vehicle movements, not using home Dopplers, and monitoring those movements as well for change. So it's been a long time in the making, but we're really proud to see that now finally off the ground, and hopefully it will have the desired impact. A few other things. Training, you'll see there, is all heading in the right direction. We're on trajectory to meet all of our targets by December. You'll see, sadly, we had 5 formal complaints and noting in month 1 around a delay in induction of labour, and you'll see there that our delays have slightly increased in months again, and we'll continue to monitor that. We have finally received our formal exit letter from the maternity support programme, and that has been shared with our colleagues at the LM&S and obviously with all our staff, with huge thanks for all the work that they've done to get us to this position. CNST, you'll see there 2 ambers within the summary table. MMVP, we have now received additional funding into the system to support the MMVP to deliver what is a huge ask that has, and we have agreed at board how we're going to address that. So hopefully what is currently amber will turn to green before December for submission. And also there's been a change to the requirements of element 1. So in next month's report, you'll see that we will be green for element 1, and hopefully we'll continue to maintain that. And I think I will leave it there and just take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Justine. Any questions or perspectives to Justine? Simon?
Just an observation, Justine, on presentation of the report. The next 2 reports on safe staffing and nurse staffing, both have a very helpful sort of introductory section with the key information in it, and then at the conclusions that's sort of repeated. I don't know whether it's possible to sort of have that formatted in your report as well, just on that upfront, that we can see exactly what we need to be aware of, and at the end as well, in the similar format to the reports that follow.
Okay, if you can take that away, thank you, Justine. That would be great.
Thanks.
So, Justine, what's worrying you most at the moment?
Probably induction of labour delays, although generally they are coming down. It's kind of a consistent theme, not only for us, but for across our colleagues nationally. And obviously, it's going to be generally, some of the impact is going to be due to staffing levels, because obviously you have to provide one-to-one care. And we, as you know, have got a number of midwives in the pipeline who are going to join us in September. So I suspect that it won't consistently continue to decrease until those midwives have joined us in September and October time. So it's just making sure that we keep everybody safe and keep all the additional surveillance around mums and babies until we can get to that point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Justine. Okay, we'll move on then to the safe staffing report. Sarah and Justine, any particular points you want to pull out here?
You want to go first, Justine, and then I'll go.
Yeah, not overly. No major changes to the KPIs you'll see, although midwife sickness was slightly down, vacancy was slightly increased, but as Ali alluded to it earlier, we've had a slight increase in our establishment as well because of some externally funded posts. Unfortunately, we did see some increase in escalations in May and some support needed from our community and continuity midwives. And I've already chatted about the number of midwives that we've got coming into post, which is great news. And we, as I say, we look forward to seeing them. No other issues to raise today.
Thanks, Justine. So we'll segue into Sarah.
Okay, so safe staffing report for nursing then. So for June with numerical data for May 24. So if we recall back in April, our vacancy rate for registered nurses was down to 2.3%, which was fantastic. And then we've had business cases approved. So we were back up to 12.6, and this month back down to 7.36. We're working really closely with Worcestershire University to actually increase our domestic pipeline nurses over the next 2 years. And really just to say that we are continuing on our downward trend on reducing our agency spend. So this is month on month now, we've got that consistent picture. And we're also seeing further decreases in the hourly agency rate that we're paying from to 32.77 an hour and from 34 in April. So I will stop there unless there's any other questions for me.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Questions or perspectives to Sarah or Justine on the safe staffing reports? Okay, look forward to seeing the continued progress, and thanks, Ali, for your team's support behind the scene on an awful lot of that. So we'll move on then to the Climate Adaptation Plan. And the development of the Climate Adaptation Plan was very much part of the 10-point plan, which we identified when Glenn and I arrived in October, which will be updated later on this year. But Jo, over to you on the Climate Adaptation Plan, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I will take the paper as read, but if you indulge me, I think it's worth just picking a few bits out, because I think one of the first questions that people might have is, why is this important to us? And I think you'll have seen, if you've read it, there's some interesting stats in there, one of which is to illustrate between 1961 and 1990, there were average 17 days of snow days in the year. I think we probably recognise that's changed over recent years, and probably more than flooding. So the purpose of this report is really both to raise awareness in terms of how climate change and adaptation is important to us, but also to get support in terms of moving towards an action plan so that we can mitigate some of the risks and changes. We know that 2022 was the hottest year on record and led to an excess of 2,800 deaths across the whole of the UK. And this affects both physical and mental health, and could lead to poorer health outcomes for a population and exacerbate health inequalities. So there are a lot of reasons why this is important, and we need to think about how we respond to that. In 2023, the national policy identified a suite and series of things we need to think about in terms of providing plans, whether that's to do with business continuity, adverse weather and health plans, whether it's looking at the standard of our facilities, whether it's looking at our green plans themselves, but also thinking about what we put into our contracts. So the span of this obviously affects a lot of different facets of the work that we do. And it's probably also worth noting that the CQC have introduced a green element to their CLOEs going forward in terms of part of their well-led reviews. So page 7 just identifies some of the challenges, not wishing to, get the mood a bit downbeat, but you can see there's a whole list of potential impacts, from flooding to extreme heat, leading to different type of pathogens, greater risk of infrastructure failures, potential impact on the electricity supply chain disruption, risk to food security, and going back to that, health inequalities and potential for migration. So there are a lot of reasons to pay attention to this. There has been the development of a local climate adaptation tool, and the Health Authority have been, very much involved and concerned and thinking about this as well, and contained within the report is some detail about how those different approaches could be looked at and worked at collectively as part of the wider partnership arrangements. But I just wanted to focus on section 4. It talks about our services and the things we need to be thinking about, and those obviously cover things like estates, facilities, and our delivery of our operational services. And I think we need to pay attention to both our business continuity plans and using the sustainability impact assessment tool that we adopted last year in the trust as a means of being able to flag out and assess what some of those risks are. So in terms of the action plan, what we've put before you today is a proposed suite of actions that will require standing up a group and some capacity to be able to focus on this. But I think it's investing, the principle really is investing now will help both patient safety and service delivery going forward. So it is one of those things we need to think about how we invest in. I'm going to pause there, Chair, because there's a lot of information in the paper, and happy to take any questions, but also any discussion that people might want to have on the topic.
No, really, thank you, Joan. Thank you for your hard work on it. Questions and perspectives. Glenn?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, the adaptation plan is an important part of our response to this issue. I think, though, you referenced the big move for the group. The big move for the group was on actual carbon reduction as opposed to adaptation. Could you talk a little bit more about where we are in terms of reducing our carbon footprint to play our part in addressing the problem?
So the ambition for the NHS is towards 2030 in terms of reducing our carbon net zero position. We actually are a bit of a national exemplar in terms of reduction of use of anaesthetic gases, for example, which are quite a big contributor to both carbon but also the nitrogen in the atmosphere. And we were one of the first to eliminate desfluorethane. And also we're working at the moment at taking out nitrous oxide usage, both on Kidderminster, the Annex, and then it'll be the Worcester side. So we have Dr. Paul Saville, who's a real pioneer in terms of the work that's being done there. One of our limitations in making progress is actually that we do need to do a carbon audit. And I think we've rehearsed earlier about some of the capital priority challenges we've got. And I think, you know, that if we had that enabled us to accelerate some of our drive in that area, because until we have that audit, we're not able to access some of the other sources of funding, such as the Salix funding, that will help us take things forward. And that's a conversation that I'm picking up with colleagues in the rest of the foundation group, because obviously they've had greater success there, but I think we need to think internally about how we manage that.
But Joe, even on some of those successes you mentioned, I think it would be good to weave that into the public narrative so that citizens and people considering whether to join the trust and how seriously we're taking the issue of sustainability will see some of the actions we're taking. Simon?
Thanks, Russell, and thanks, Joe. Very, very comprehensive introduction to a subject. I guess intuitively now we need to be doing some things about. You've touched a little bit on funding for some of this by mentioning Salix, and I think that is obviously a source to go looking for. And on page 114 out of the pack of 150, I think we're touching on things to do. And for me, it's more very specifics on what we should be doing, and then how we're going to do that. Obviously funding, and you know, some of these we'll be doing with partners. So for me, maybe this is a work in progress where we come back and then say very specifically, this is what we now need to do. And some of these things we understand we won't be able to do straight away because we can't afford it, but maybe get some sense of priorities or a hierarchy of what we can do sooner rather than later, and how they'll be funded. For me, that sort of is the next bit of the plan I think we need to see.
Yeah, it's a good challenge, Simon, if you can take that away, Joe. And Colin?
Hi, Joe. Forgive me if it's covered, but I didn't see it when I read through the paper. What impact will this have on the agenda for dealing with health inequalities? Because I assume that some of these horrible threats that you're dealing with here will have a greater impact on those who are less able to look after themselves.
No, I think you're spot on there, Colin. Actually, what I call the long borders between the impact of some of the green sustainability issues and health inequalities, you know, is a really strong, there's a strong correlation. We have been doing a little bit of work, particularly looking at air quality. So a colleague in BI has been looking at some of the correlation between some of our poorer super output areas, which is the way that the local authority measures economic population level value, and then correlating that against attendances in hospital. And we're looking at respiratory, COPD, cardiac, the impact of those different areas. Again, we've talked to the university, who've also got quite a local interest in this because some of their students live next to the bus station. But we're also coordinating with colleagues in the council who just, I was just talking this week, are doing some similar work. So I think this is absolutely the way to go. We need to link up the population health with the spatial geographical where these people are situated and understand the impact it's having on who's turning up at our front door. And then you can roll that into obviously the effect of climate change and that worsening situation.
Okay, great, thank you. And finally, Julie, then we'll move on.
Thanks. I don't think this can be taken in isolation from every other policy we've got. And just for an example today, we've heard about parking, we've heard about widening road access. I've not heard about electric car chargers coming in. I've not heard about ring and ride systems for patients coming in. And in the quality report, one of the opening things is the fact that the maternity ward, we can't even close the windows in the winter, so people are cold. So not only are we not helping climate change, we're actually making it worse by not having our maintenance programme up to date. So I think that somehow this kind of agenda has got to run through absolutely everything else we do. We know it's not just a question of being, dare I use the word woke. This directly affects people's health and it affects everybody, and we've got to do something about it. And yet we've taken it in isolation almost a lot of the time when it needs to be part of everything we do. Sorry, rant over.
No, I think that's a great challenge, Julie. It does, if we're not careful, it just becomes, and I'm not saying this about you, Joe, I'm saying it generally, it just becomes a box we need to tick to show that we're doing something rather than a whole mindset issue. So, Joe, you can come back in, but I think it's a principle of what Julie's saying, which I think is important for the whole of the TMB. Joe?
I absolutely welcome the discussion because I think it's so spot on, and I think that is the risk, isn't it, that people pass over because they don't understand the relevance. So I'm very happy to produce a more detailed prioritised plan. Really happy to think we have got the sustainability impact assessment, and we have rehearsed about making sure that we get it embedded into the trust. And I think this gives us impetus to to make sure that is done in a wholesale way.
Yeah, I mean, it's often that sort of balance between the helplessness of the global situation when you see just how much pollution is being produced by countries like China and India, and we're allowing them to do all of the messy stuff whilst we get out of it, whilst taking genuine moral responsibility for the things we can control and influence. And I think that's the principle of what Julie's saying, and I fully support it. So on the basis this is a work in progress, on the basis we're going to start to embed it in all of our actions and thinking, and on the basis that we will take some of the things, and Julie mentioned the issue around closing windows properly and not wasting heat. Are we happy? If you're not happy to approve this as a work in progress, please raise a digital hand. Okay, look forward to this debate continuing, Joe, and equally the debate being pushed down into the teams, particularly the state teams. We're then on to the operational plan for this year, which we're obviously in. Joe, over to you.
This is for information, Chair, and it's just tidying up the governance because if you recall, we had to delegate final sign-off to yourself and the Chief Executive. So it is for information at this stage, but it details the annual plan for this year. I think we probably noted earlier that with the new government change, there may be some further information that is shared later in the autumn, but this was the plan that was signed off.
No, super. Thank you, Joe. Any questions or perspectives on this? And we'll just note it. Okay, we're then on to patient safety and quality of care and pressurised services. Sarah.
Thank you, Russell. So this is in response at the request of NHS England to a letter that was received in the Trust on the 26th of June following the airing of the Channel 4 Dispatches documentary filmed in the emergency department at the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital. As a result, NHSE wrote to all boards, integrated care boards and local authority chief execs requesting that every board considered 6 key points that were included in the letter. So this has been a joint work between myself, Helen and Jules as the executive TRI. And what we want to offer is that we feel that we've reviewed the 6 points in the letter and that we do have the good governance and the implementation oversight at trust board level. And the assurance that the 6 points outlined in the letter have been urgently reviewed. and we are continuing to work with system partners to ensure that our patients are treated with kindness, dignity and respect, especially at times of challenge and wherever they may be being cared for within the hospital. And as we've seen in our performance report, we are now seeing green shoots around our UEC performance, and we have improved our working relationships. We'll continue to do so across the system. So I wasn't going to say any more on that, but any of us are happy to take any questions, Russell.
Yeah, just before we go to any questions or perspectives, I've heard some say, not in the foundation group, when the Channel 4 dispatches programme came out, which was very powerful, there but for the grace of God go we. I don't accept that. I think it is absolutely essential for us to support staff when we're under enormous pressure. But there is never an excuse for a lack of compassion, which was a word we used earlier when talking about values. There's never an excuse for a lack of kindness. There's never an excuse to fail to provide hydration and the practicalities of life, no matter how pressurised you are. And so to all of my frontline teams, you know, because if you listen to these board meetings, know how much I thank you at the start of every meeting. I know it's not easy, but it is absolutely essential for us to continue to provide compassion in all circumstances. And there is never an excuse for a lack of compassion. Equally, on the subject of compassion, there's never an excuse for being lacking in compassion to colleagues when they're under stress and doing their best. So with that, other questions and perspectives, Glenn?
Certainly concur with what you just said there, Chairman. And thank you, Sarah, for pulling this together. I think it's a good response to the letter from NHS England. I know we're going to get another winter letter soon in terms of how we manage over the coming year. And I suppose it's quite tempting to be assuring in response to such a letter, but I think we shouldn't miss the point that we made earlier around the need to improve our discharge pathways as a system. Let's not lose sight of what we learned during that MAID event and the fact that that is an area where we could make further improvements.
Yeah, now if I can just build on that, Glenn, and to system partners, where we know transformation is required, it is beholden on us to get on with it before winter arrives, particularly in the area of discharge and community beds. Tony?
Thanks, Russell. It's on the similar theme. Sarah, there's a reference in your comments to a 6-week review of the Better Care Fund with partners. I wonder what our hopes and expectations are coming out of that, please.
I'll refer to Helen because Helen's leading on that. Helen.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't expect anything to change particularly, Tony, where the money is being spent across the system from a Better Care Fund point of view. It's the right time to review it because we're starting to get into the time of year where we're allocating now for next year. But I mean, a lot of the money that's in the Better Care Fund is committed through some of the discharge pathways that should be in there. And I think what we're looking for, from my point of view, having not been part of it in this system, but I know other colleagues have, is the assurance that we are actually spending it on the right things and there isn't duplication. Having done this in another system, we saw an awful lot of duplication where actually we saved quite a bit of money, and that could have been put towards other things to support patients in terms of their discharge. So I don't think we'll see a big change, Tony, if I'm completely honest.
Helen. Sarah, did you want to come in? Because otherwise I'll make a point.
Not on the BCF, but on another point, if that's okay, Chairman.
If you can just bear with me for a second then. Yep. I think, you know, we need, on the BCF, we need to be careful we're not penny wise, pound foolish on the way the BCF is encouraged to work. We've seen in Warwickshire the real benefits of the Community Recovery Service, which helps people get home early, earlier than otherwise they would. We save all that expensive beds. We can free up elective beds. We can get flow working. We can get more income. We can reduce the size of the deficit. So again, to system partners, let's not be penny wise, pound foolish when it comes to the whole system opportunity of ensuring our patients are in the right place for their well-being and the right place for the financial well-being of the system. Sarah?
Just on a point that Glenn raised, Chairman, is around, it is about discharge, but it's also around how we share the risk across the system, because when we get at times of extreme pressure, it is the acute trust where we hold patients in our ED department. We board more patients on our wards, and the region have actually pulled together 3 quality summits which will take place August, September and October, with the specific view is to look at how do we risk share, and how are we making decisions around some of the key fundamentals such as boarding and infection prevention control practices, which remain a challenge for us across the system. So I think that will be helpful as well, moving us forward.
No, without being too passionate about it, it's an abject nonsense that if you've got 48 people who have been with us 30 days each, or 35 days each, longer than they should be, that is bad for their well-being, both physically and mentally. It is a waste of money. We're wasting over £500,000 as a system, not getting those people into the right care setting, and we're missing the enormous income generation possibility on the elective side. It's an abject nonsense. Let's not be penny wise, pound foolish, system colleagues. Colleagues, happy to move on? Okay, thank you for that. We look forward to seeing how those discussions develop, because it sounds as though it's going to be an interesting one. But please, Helen, do make sure we continue to be briefed on the BCF discussions as they occur. So I think first up is the Quality Governance Committee update. We've got the minutes from the meeting of the 30th of May, but Julie, anything you particularly wanted to emphasise?
Now, having raised the windows, I think everything else has been covered by either Justine or Sarah throughout the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for your hard work and colleagues on that committee. Any questions or perspectives to Julie? And Colin on the Audit and Assurance Committee. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to update the board, at the last private meeting, the board delegated responsibility to the Audit and Assurance Committee to sign off the annual report and the financial statements. So we did that. We had 2 meetings in June for various reasons, but that has been done and they've been submitted. And we also received the external auditor's annual report and the value for money report, which will be considered at a later date at the Audit Committee.
Okay, super. Thank you, Colin. Any questions to Colin on that? And congratulations, Colin, on being elected, I was going to say, to become a non-executive director at our friends at Hereford and Worcestershire Partnership Trust, where I think you're going to be chair of audit there as well, and sort of demonstrates our commitment to systems working. And then finally, I think we're on to the People and Culture Committee. Karen, anything you particularly wanted to pull out?
No, I can be very quick here. I think we're out of sequence because we had the last meeting on the 3rd of June and I reported on that at our last board meeting, and the next one's not to the 6th of August. So
short and sweet.
Indeed.
Thank you. So I assume there are no questions to Karen. Any other business, colleagues? Can you please raise a digital hand if you've got any other business? Okay, and any questions from members of the public that we're aware of, Erica? Erica? Okay, I can't hear you, Erica, but I assume not. We've only got, I think, one member of the public with us. Chris, is there anything you'd like to ask us before we draw the meeting to a close?
No, I think we covered everything this morning, didn't we, really, on our issues list. So thank you for that.
Okay, super. Well, look forward to our next board meeting as this board on the 10th of September, but we do have the 4 board foundation group board meeting on the first Wednesday in August. To members of the public who might be watching this, that's a different type of board meeting. I would encourage you to come along to it because we compare and contrast the performance across the 4 different parts of the foundation group of the George Eliot, South Warwickshire University Foundation Trust, Worcestershire Acute and Wye Valley, and you may find it informative as a result. In the meantime, take care everyone. Thank you all colleagues who are watching this for your hard work, and for board colleagues I suggest we have a 10-minute break, get back together again at 2:30. Which I know is a bit shorter, but I'll try and save you some time at the end of your days. So 2:30, look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.